Hello, I'm Joanne Williams. I hope you enjoyed the videos from Milwaukee community leaders and young folks as they share how local elections matter and why you should make a plan to vote in the general election on April 6th. Most of the things that happen in our day-to-day lives are affected by local government. So if you care about education, about affordable housing, about criminal justice, make a plan to vote on April 6th. Better yet, you can start voting early on March 23rd. Go to your local municipality, get an absentee ballot, and take it to the drop-off location. If you want more information, go to myvote.wi.gov or call your local election office.
Hey, let's get out there and vote. Voting is our voice. I'm a resident of 53206, and it is up to us to vote in leaders that will support our community ideas and interests. That's what democracy looks like. So get out there and vote on April 6th. Please tell your friends and your family too. Just know I plan on voting, and I hope you do the same.
Hello, I'm Matthew Goss,
I'm Brandon Goss.
and we are members of the NAACP Youth Council of Milwaukee. We are here to let you know that on April 6th, you have the chance to get your child an equitable, fair, and quality education.
On April 6th, let's 2021, let's close the educational gap.
On April 6th, you have the chance to vote for the Wisconsin School Superintendent. See y'all out there, April 6th!
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I am a leader at Youth Empowered in the Struggle. April 6th is Election Day, and it is very important that you go out and vote. These local elections affect us greatly. They affect our schools, our public transit, housing, and other various services. Unfortunately, I cannot vote because I am 17, but I ask that on April 6th, you go out and vote for leaders who will create a positive change for our future. Thank you.
My name is Asia.
My name is Golden, and we are members of the Milwaukee NAACP Youth Council.
My name is Crystal, and these are my girls. Did you know the decisions of the state superintendent of public instruction impact school curriculum choices, which includes art, music programs, STEM, and more?
The decisions also impact education for children with disabilities, the quality of educators,
Public library resources and educational opportunities.
we want a great education.
We want to be able to compete with the best.
So do your homework and thoroughly vet the candidates. Vote on April 6th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and may the best candidate win.
Vote like our lives depend on it, because it does.
Vote!
Hey, family. This is Greg Lewis, Executive Director of Souls to the Polls. And I just want to remind everybody that there's going to be an election on April 6th, and it's an important election. We want to talk to you about voting for the DPI director. That's going to be the person who has control over all the schools in Wisconsin. And we need our folks to come out and vote, because that's a very important piece of the puzzle for our young children. And we're going to be talking about county supervisors and judges and school board members. We need everybody to vote, because this is the most important election that we can be involved in, because this is all local. This is the time when we have an opportunity to talk to and talk about and encourage folks to vote for people who are going to have a direct influence on our lives. We have to go out and vote this time, because if we don't vote, then we're not relevant. You got to vote right now, because these local elections are so very important. These local elections can make or break us. It's all right to vote for the president. It's all right to vote for the governor and senators, but these local elections are the important elections. And we need to show that we're involved in the civic duties that we have, we're going to take advantage of. You need to get out and vote April 6th, because those are important elections. And again, we want to be relevant. Thank you.
I am Joanne Williams, and welcome to tonight's program. I'm the former host of Black Nouveau on Milwaukee PBS, and currently the executive producer of the upcoming documentary film, The Exchange in White America, Kakana and King 50 Years Later. Welcome to the Local Elections Matter, Education, Voter Laws, and Maximizing the Turnout, featuring voter rights advocate Anita Johnson as our moderator. The guest panelists tonight are Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley. Hold up your hand. There you are. Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction Title I Assistant Manager, Dr. Damon Means. We have Milwaukee Public School Board Director, Sequana Taylor. 9 to 5 Leadership and Training Manager, True Freeman. There she is. New Covenant Baptist Church Pastor Willie Briscoe. And there he is, right there. You know, if anything, in the past year, in 2020, we've all learned that our local government is very important. It plays a key role in keeping our communities safe and our economy steady during these unprecedented times. Tonight, we explore the far-reaching effect that local elections have on the quality of our lives, and more specifically, the needs of Black and Brown children and families. Before I introduce our moderator for tonight, let's cover a few basic Zoom rules. Feel free to place any of your questions for the panelists in the Q&A box. The chat has been disabled, so put your questions in the Q&A. Please select Speaker View in the left-hand corner of the Zoom in order to keep your device zoomed on the person who is speaking. So without further delay, I'm going to introduce you to tonight's moderator, Anita Johnson, who is with Vote Writers Wisconsin ID State Coalition Coordinator. She's also the Education and Outreach Coordinator for Souls to the Polls MKE. Anita.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Joanne. I would like to thank all of the panel members for taking time out of their busy schedules for this evening's panel discussion. We will start with self-introductions from the panel members. Truth Freeman, I would like for you to start with a self-introduction about your position at 9 to 5. Please kindly describe your background, your current position, and its impact on the community.
Thanks, Anita. My name is Truth Freeman. I work with a national women's organization called 9 to 5, National Association of Working Women, in our Wisconsin office. We have offices in Georgia, Wisconsin, and Colorado. We have members all over the country. In Wisconsin, we serve more than 8,000 members in Fox Valley, Racine, Kenosha, Milwaukee, and the surrounding neighborhoods of Milwaukee. I've been doing social change, social justice work in this community for more than 25 years, almost 30 years. The work that I do at 9 to 5 involves everything from working on issues that impact women, from domestic violence to addiction recovery, helping women find their voices, working on sexual harassment, family medical leave insurance, working on equal pay, as well as working on civic engagement, how to help people build community power and civic engagement, and the list goes on. So that's a little bit about who we are.
Thank you very much. County Executive David Crowley, describe your position, your function, and the impact it has on our community.
Well, thank you so much, Anita, and thank you to all the sponsors of this event. I'm honored to be here to talk about why it's important to exercise our civic duty. Again, I'm Milwaukee County Executive, and the Milwaukee County play a pivotal role in making sure that we are there to be at our best when people are at our worst. So when you think about many of the safety net programs within Milwaukee County, they fall within our organization. So we serve people with disabilities. We serve our older population. We serve our child welfare, and think about our young people and birth to 3 programs. But we're also responsible for all the parks right here within Milwaukee County, as well as our Milwaukee County transit system. And right now, I'm really excited about the mission that we have set out for, which is making sure that we become the healthiest county in the state of Wisconsin by achieving racial equity. And we've been at the forefront of the COVID pandemic, doing everything that we can to make sure we can open up safely. People can enjoy life again, and hopefully our children can get back to school soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, County Executive. And I'm so sorry. You know, I know you so well. It's hard for me to say all of that. Pastor Briscoe, I know that you're retired, but still, I would like for you to describe your background, your current position, and its impact on our community.
Thank you. My name is Reverend Willie Briscoe. I currently serve as the Associate Minister at New Covenant Baptist Church under the leadership of Pastor F.L. Cruther. I am currently a member of Micah.
Yes.
I am just completing my second term as the Wisdom President. I retired from Milwaukee County House of Correction as Assistant Superintendent in 2009. And even during my time there and currently, I have worked on social justice issues. That has been a passion of mine, and that is what I will be doing from this period on. I am a member of the Gamaliel National Network that also does social justice on a global, almost global and national level. So I am excited to be here tonight talking about these issues because they deal with something that I am passionate about, restoring the vote to the people that's incarcerated and being able to advocate for the least of those. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Pastor Briscoe. Dr. Means, welcome. Please describe your position, your organization's function, and its impact on our community. You are muted, Dr. Means. Okay.
Yes, I think that's going to be our famous last words with this pandemic. You're muted. Any opportunity to be on the same panel with Minister Briscoe, but more importantly, our esteemed county executive is always good. My name is Damon Means. I am a lifelong educator. I've been in Georgia the last few years, but returned this year and became really intrigued with educational policy work. So right now I'm working with the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction, specifically working with our state's most struggling schools and trying to create. And so my sister who was speaking from 9 to 5 was speaking my language, working with our DPI, Department of Public Instruction, to create more opportunities for families of color to be engaged in the decision-making of our schools. And so I'm here today to just lend some perspective on the process of voting and why it's important, and just pleased to be here. So thank you again to all the organizers, and looking forward to a very fruitful conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Means. Ms. Freeman, 9 to 5 is not only known locally, but nationally in your fight for the equal justice for women. Can you tell us a bit about your membership and what 9 to 5 does for its members?
Sure. Yes, as I was saying earlier, we are a national women's organization, and we work with members all over the country. So our history really started working around organizing office workers. So a lot of our work focused on right for office workers, equal pay, challenges around sexual harassment, and that and balancing working family. That became the core of our work. As over the years, as that work grew, there was a strong focus on late 80s and early 90s, anti-oppression, anti-Blackness, working with women of color in the workplace. A lot of work around equal pay. We know March is Women's History Month and Black Feminist Month. And one of the things that happens in March is Equal Pay Day for Women. And what that is, a lot of people don't, is that it's the time of year when a woman makes as much as a man for the whole year. And it's interesting enough. So for instance, March 9th was Equal Pay Day for Asian American women. That was the day of the year that they made as much as a white man last year. For women of color, for women, African heritage women, we don't reach that same amount of money until September of this year. For my Latino and Latinx sisters, they don't reach that amount of money until October. For Native American women, it's even later. And for European or white women, it's March 24th. So these are, and that's startling. That's how long it takes us the following year to make as much money for our dollar as the year before. So we work on equal pay, equal rights for women. We do a lot of work around education, civic engagement, building power in communities. What does that mean? That means helping us understand that voting really is our superpower, helping understand the significance of voting. Also, how do we identify women, young women, women of color who can run for office? How do we prepare them to run for office? How do we help them understand what it means to run for office in that process? And supporting the work of other organizations like Emerge, as well as understanding public policy. Why is it important to vote? Why does the position of public instruction, why is that important? How is that going to impact you and your household? So that's a big part of the work that we do locally and nationally.
Thank you very much, Ms. Freeman, for that. Mr. County Executive, David Crowley. COVID-19 has further widened the existence gaps and iniquities in Wisconsin public schools. What do you see as the main challenges facing our schools right now? You're muted.
As Dr. Means said, we're going to continue to see that. But I would say that, when you think about our educators, our parents, and our students, I think everyone is interested in how we can safely resume education while making sure that we can accommodate the needs of everyone, because I know that it's been tough. And I have to make sure that I say this, that Milwaukee County, we don't make decisions for the different school districts, but we do play a role in the distribution of the vaccine rollout. And we've been serving as a partner with all of our local municipalities to get as many shots in the arms of residents as possible. And so we know that the faster we can get people vaccinated, the faster we can start the transition to reopening many different aspects of our society. And this does include schools. And this is why we've launched our zip code program. Monday, March 22nd is going to start. And I would highly recommend people to visit covidmke.com to find out if they live in one of those zip codes. But it's going to be tough for many of our children. It's tough for our parents right now. And it's going to have a huge impact. And this is one of the reasons why we are stepping up at the local level to get as many shots in people's arms as possible, because we know that there's a lot of fear out there about the COVID-19 virus. But again, it's important that we all band together. We get as many people vaccinated as possible, because if we don't get our children into school, it's going to take a toll of them. And I can say, being a father of three girls, 13, 3, and 1, my 13-year-old, she's definitely enjoying doing school virtually, but I know that she misses her friends. And when you think about parents who have younger children, I know it's a struggle for us, and my daughter needs that structure at the age of 3, particularly because she's learning to read. She knows how to count. So I know I'm not qualified to actually teach my child at this moment. And I could be very busy being county exec, but we have to open up the schools. Otherwise, it's going to be a detriment to many families right here in Milwaukee County.
Thank you. Dr. Beans, the February 16th election, we had a very low voter turnout, less than 10%. I feel that people didn't know who they were voting for, what the positions were. Nothing was defined. And so a lot of people just didn't go to the polls to vote because they didn't know what they were voting for. I would like for you to explain to us what do education advocates say they want to see from the next state superintendent. First of all, tell us what the state superintendent does and how it affects us. And what do you think the advocates are going to want to see from this next state superintendent?
That's an excellent question. I think a lot of people don't know. It is the way that this election ended up on the April ballot, the year or the right after a presidential election, is really odd when you consider how important it is. The state superintendent of the Department of Public Instruction does a lot of different things. The Department of Public Instruction is the organization that receives all the funds from the federal government, from the Department of Education. So when you this nearly $2 trillion stimulus that President Biden has just passed, there's millions of dollars coming into the state of Wisconsin, and in some cases trillions of dollars that's going to go directly to schools, and they're supposed to be used in a certain way. The Department of Public Instruction oversees the use of all Title I funds. Title I is part of a law that was passed by President Johnson during his tenure as president, and part of his Great Society package to create more equity for people. The Department of Public Instruction is the organization that licenses teachers and provides licenses to teachers. It is a very important position. The state superintendent of schools is also the person that serves as the liaison from a legislative standpoint between the governor and the legislature. And so the type of schools that our kids are in is very important. Here's one other thing that I believe people of color don't know at all about our educational system. There is something in our state called Cooperative Education Service Agencies, or CESAs. There's 12 CESAs all across the state. There's millions of dollars flowing through these CESAs that then go to vendors and consultants and people who are charged with serving our kids. The state superintendent is the person who is the main contact between those CESAs and the Department of Public Instruction. So what I would say is that the state superintendent is someone who forms policy. They are tracking where dollars are going, and they are in charge of our Title I money, which at the core, until there's conversations around how to address inequities of the past in this nation, it is the one consistent policy that we've had at the national level that is intended to address the inequities and the barriers that people of color have received in this country. That's supposed to be our way. And so when we talk about Title I, that should be a community conversation that all flows through the state superintendent.
Thank you. Pastor Briscoe, research has shown that the children of incarcerated parents are 5 times more likely to end up in prison themselves. Many of the children of incarcerated parents have desires to better themselves and be law-abiding citizens. What kind of support or resources can you recommend that K-12 children of incarcerated parents need to break the family prison circle?
Well, I would start at the basic. They need their fathers and their mothers back in their households, because the criminal justice system is far too leaning towards one specific race. We make up minute parts of the state, but we serve a greater capacity in the incarcerated citizens. And I call them citizens because when you go to jail, citizenship is not something you lose. It is something that the criminal justice system imposes on you. And these children of these incarcerated citizens Not only do they not have their parents, but they have no contact or no access to other mentors because they are impoverished, living in impoverished neighborhoods that are the schools are the less supported. We must come up with a way in order to turn this system from a one of punishment back to rehabilitation, to real rehabilitation, which means that people do not lose their voting rights. They are not settled with an anvil on their back that permits them from getting meaningful employment. And they are not looked down upon as disposable people because this reverberates through the family. This is why the poverty that their children are put in because of this terribly one-sided system leads to their education level and leads to their look at this pandemic. Most of our kids had no Wi-Fi, no laptops, and then when they did get them, there was a learning curve with the parents of the impoverished. So we're looking at a situation of poverty that is affecting our whole community. This imbalance of resources, this discriminatory treatment of our people, and our people being declared citizens and being settled with a lifetime of a title of a felon or the inability to vote and to participate in their community. These things, along with others that are leading to this generational, what you call pipeline to prison.
Thank you very much. We are going to be opening up the floor for questions and answers from the public. Kim, did you have any questions?
There are no questions at this time.
Okay. Ms. Freeman, because of the pandemic, reaching out to your members has been a challenge. How did 9 to 5 maintain a relationship with their members to encourage them to vote?
So during the pandemic, like most of us, we pivoted, we were creative, phone calls, phone banking, texting. I'm sure more texting than people wanted to receive. We had what we call virtual rallies for folks that did have access to computers and internet. We would have literally virtual rallies online, which it looks like a Zoom meeting, but it's much more enthusiastic and really focused on getting folks out the vote. We hired folks in Fox Valley, in Milwaukee, in Racine and Kenosha, canvassers, which we had trained, but of course, after the pandemic, they did virtual and digital canvassing in their communities. We also started something called Car Caravan, where we literally would ride through neighborhoods. It would be a trail of cars with microphones, encouraging people, one, to fill out their census so they could be counted, and two, to go out to vote. And we would have information and flyers and voting information literally on the cars, on the windshield wipers, under the windshield wipers, so people could, with social distancing and no contact, could come out and get information. And we would speak to them from their homes, from their porches, from the balconies, from wherever, giving them information about voting. So those are some of we did a variety of things to make sure we got people out to vote, and we were successful in contacting over 100,000 folks doing that.
Thank you. Mr. County Executive David Crowley, there's a move by the Wisconsin legislators to introduce bills that would hurt people's ability to cast their ballots and exercise their right to vote. This would also create barriers for voting for Black and Brown communities. How can your office advocate, promote, and protect the right to vote when current legislators are trying to restrict our voting rights?
Well, voting policies are enacted and enforced primarily at the state level. And these policies, which include voter identification requirements, whether we're talking early voting provisions, online voter registration systems, and more, dictate the conditions under which citizens can actually cast their ballots. And so we support in Milwaukee County making it easier for people to vote and really make their voices heard. And we need to do that. We should not make it harder for folks to vote. And at the end of the day, we cannot continue to allow people to promote the big lie that we've seen being promoted last year and earlier this year. This election was not stolen. And we had more people getting out to vote and actually exercising their right because they felt the need to let their voices be heard. And so at the local level, we need to continue to encourage people to vote, but again, work with our state legislators to make it easier for folks to vote. You know, when we talk about all this voter fraud, and you may hear that rhetoric continuously, you know, there isn't anything out there that will change this election or any other election. And so we need to make sure that we continue to push back on rhetoric that is not true and do everything that we can locally and at the state level to not only make sure that some of these laws that have been introduced does not pass and work with the governor to veto them if they do, but work with our state legislators to make sure we can have easier access to vote, particularly when you think about the marginalized communities that have historically been underserved. And right now, when you think about communities, our disability community, making sure that they have access to vote as well.
Thank you. Dr. Means, you have done a great job in talking about what the state superintendent does. But why is it important that the individuals make a special effort to vote on April 6th for the next DPI state superintendent?
It's a great question. I would share with you that in terms of education, we are at a crossroads. And what I mean by crossroads is that with this inflection of nearly trillions of dollars going through our school systems, the time for us to ensure that equity is not just a buzzword, but it's something that is actually happening is now. And the next state superintendent is the person who's going to make that a reality. And so the issue will know, we can't say that we don't have enough money. The money that's been, and there's a runway. President Biden was smart enough and Congress was smart enough to say, and you can use this money through June 30 of 2024 in some cases. So this money's going to be here for a while. And so this position is a statewide position. I think many people have heard me say this before, and I went to the Deep South. I went to Georgia for 3 years to serve as a superintendent. And even in Georgia, they know that the one state in America that has the worst achievement gap for Black students is right here in Wisconsin. So the next state superintendent, if they don't make the education of Black kids specifically and explicitly part of their agenda, then shame on all of us, because the time is now. There's no more time to talk about this. I'm now at an advanced age where I can remember we've been talking about this for 15, 20 years about how Black kids are not achieving at a certain level. We've been on the bottom of achievement for Black children now for an entire generation. So the kids who we said were at the bottom 15 years ago, those kids they've matriculated through the system. And now in some cases, they are parents. And so if when we think about what County Exec Crawley and what Reverend Briscoe has to deal with and Ms. Freeman has to deal with, that's all a trickle down to the fact that in Wisconsin, we have undereducated our kids. And one last thing, and I'll be fast. Many of us have been parents and we've gone to school nights. And I want you to remember, when you go to those school nights, they'll slide a sheet in front of you and they'll say, please sign this. It's the Title I presentation night. You're being bamboozled and hoodwinked, because the Title I money is how our government says they're paying our kids back. And so what we need to do, and that's why I'm so excited about this policy work, what we need to do is to make sure that Black families, brown families, our Asian brothers and sisters, they actually have voice in how our schools are being opened and how those title dollars are being used. I guarantee you, in Waukesha County, they are engaging their parents before they make decisions around how they're going to reopen. My question to all of us is, how are predominantly minority and highly minority school systems, how are they engaging their families? If they're engaging their families, are they bringing those families to the table? That's what we mean by marginalizing voices. And so I will conclude by just saying this. This is a statewide race that has to eventually perform for Black kids and brown kids in this state of Wisconsin.
Thank you. Pastor Briscoe, you have been a long time advocate of social rights and equal justice. And I know that you have done a lot of work with Wisdom and their fight for the prisoners. The laws have made it difficult for prisoners to vote when they're in jail and not a felon. Once a person is out of jail and off paper, he doesn't even know that he has the right to vote or that the right to vote has been restored, nor does he or she know how to verify that he is off paper. First of all, I would like for you to please give us a definition of off paper and what that means to a felon.
Well, off paper means that you're no longer under supervision or on probation or parole. It means that you're totally out of the state's view of supervision. And let me go back further than that. There's only one thing in the Constitution that should prevent you from voting, and that is treason, where you are no longer a citizen of this country. Committing a crime or being accused of a crime does not relinquish that citizenship. This is an unfair, illegal imposition on the human rights of this country. And we should be all for attacking that system because it marginalized a certain part of the population. It's voter suppression and its finest. It goes all the way back to the founding fathers, and everybody's always talking about our founding fathers, but that was voter suppression and it's greatest because you couldn't vote if you were Black, you couldn't vote if you were Native American, you couldn't vote if you were not a landowner. All of that was to ensure that a certain population remained in power. It's no different now. Why we're advocating for the prisoner, because that is the new form of slavery. That is the new form of incarcerating what they call the threatening part of the population. Why is that part of the population threatening? Because they haven't bought into and relinquished their rights since they were freed from slavery. And that they are trying to suppress those rights, and they are trying to do it in a modern Jim Crow system. So it is important that we fight and replace the rights of all of our citizens. They should be delivered ballots behind bars if they're incarcerated, and they should be informed of all of their rights the moment they are out in the public, because they are taking your rights away, and they do not let the people know when they are restored. And that is why we have a lot of people running around in our community that don't know that they are eligible to vote, even under this oppressive system. But that should no longer not be in place in the first place, because they are citizens, whether they're behind bars or whatever. It does not say that we put them there for punishment. It says rehabilitation. And you cannot be rehabilitated unless you are fully participating in your community.
Thank you, Pastor Briscoe. Ms. Freeman, What measures do you recommend policymakers enact that could help reduce the economic and social burdens for women, children, and families today?
Well, I have a long list, and
we want to make it short, but we want to make it powerful.
Let me see if I literally wrote them down because, well, so first of all, let's see. So one is supporting so first I want to start with, of course, FMLA and FMLI, family medical leave and family medical leave insurance. Because that's the core of our work. Also, not supporting any kind of legislation that further extends voter suppression. Stop. So that is significant. And of course, continuing to support COVID relief efforts. We could support the governor's budget. We could start there. There's also supporting legislation that expands childcare, making childcare more accessible, more affordable, extending hours. We have first, second, and third shift parents, and they need childcare. There's a new bill that was introduced, the Wisconsin Economic Justice Bill of Rights. That's another way of that has just about everything you can think of it in it. I think the only thing that might be missing is some of the work that Dignity at Work Coalition is doing around extending immigrant rights. And so other than that, also we want to, there's some specific legislation around extending laws that help against workplace violence against women and women of color. Like the example would be the shooting that just happened in Georgia, where all of the Asian women were killed. Again, workplace violence and racism. So those would be some of the things around legislation that I would encourage to be sorted.
Thank you. County Exec, state and local legislators, such as yourself, has recommended increasing the local sales tax 1%. If the constituents vote for this increase, will any of this additional revenue go to the resources needed to help supplement K-12 budget, shortfalls, or mental and social needs of students, families, and teachers?
I think that's a great question. And I'm going to ask for a little bit of time because I want to make sure that so people know the problem that this solution is aiming to fix. And so the biggest barrier for Milwaukee County from achieving our goals is a structural deficit that we face each year that has been created by state mandated. And when you think about the state imposed funding limits and the growing costs of the state mandated services. So for the past almost 10 years, since 2012, Milwaukee County has cut $30 million per year from our budget. And when you think about it, this is extremely alarming. And so our region needs to thrive in order to remain a good partner and contribute to the rest of the state. And so the challenges facing our community is critical. And we're not alone. This is a widespread problem across the state, meaning that they impact communities, large, small, urban, and rural. And these challenges have a tangible impact on all of our different communities. And we're seeking to really invest in local priorities. And these local priorities include addressing the mental and social health needs of students and families and teachers. And so the governor, he included the half-cent local option sales tax in his budget. And this proposal, which would enable both Wisconsin counties and Wisconsin municipalities. So that's counties, that's cities, that's villages, that's towns with a population that's greater than 30,000 to enact a half-cent sales tax, particularly after going to referendum by the voters. But this is to provide critical tools, necessary tools for local governments who are seeking to also reduce property taxes and invest in local priorities. When you think about the Metro Milwaukee area, we account for more than 30% of the state's economic output. But we need the tools to make the necessary investments to continue and to create an environment that allows us to compete with other metropolitan areas, particularly for investments and people. So this option will provide our residents really with a voice, but more importantly, with the ability to vote for this tool that allows us to capture the benefits of our own economic performance and invest in local priorities. And so, I would say that we're looking forward to working with Madison leaders on this proposal throughout this process. But this is critical in making sure that we can invest in families in our most vulnerable communities and really move the needle in achieving racial equity here locally.
Thank you. Dr. Means, Wisconsin districts struggle to attract and retain professional, diverse teachers. What can the Department of Public Instruction do to assist with recruitment, training, and retention efforts of all well-qualified educators for PK-12?
Well, I think DPI has an opportunity to work with interested educators of color with their licensing and to make that process much easier. But there's another opportunity that the department has, and that is to work with the legislature. When I was a young man coming out of college, there were forgiveness loans that were provided to educators who worked in school districts with at least 25%, a population of 25% of Black and Brown students. The DPI can continue to work with the legislature to maybe increase that loan forgiveness program. We have that for physicians in our state. We have it for other positions of professional walks of life in our state. To revisit that type of loan forgiveness program for teachers of color in particular would help a great deal. And those are just a few areas where DPI can be of assistance.
Thank you. Pastor Briscoe, how can voter advocates and volunteers assist potential voters, the felons, so he or she feels secure in registering to vote? Pastor Briscoe? Can you hear me? Pastor Briscoe? Okay.
First of all, we must remove the stigma and we must engage them. And I will speak for the church. We have got to make a seamless entry back into the community with all of this information, with all of the civic things that they need to know to restore their rights as citizens. Because in being incarcerated takes those rights away, which I vehemently protest that they should never be taken in the first place. But we must make a system of seamless, and I'm trying to find the right word to stay on point here, but it must be entry back into the community with the knowledge and the tools to succeed. Most of their time is spent trying to survive and trying to get back on task. So the voting rights are the last thing on their mind when they're trying to survive. So we've got to make it easier for them to get into society, to get a job, to restore their place in society, and to restore their place in the community and make them viable voters again. And we must tell them and demonstrate this to them. And one thing we must do, and we must show them love, because that is one thing that is missing from this whole equation. You are not a disposable person. You are not lost as a human being. And these rights are the rights yours. And we must tell them that it is important for them to assume this role again, because we need their votes, we need their engagement, and their children need their participation in the system.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman, how can we get people to vote in local elections if they don't have a job?
Well, I think, to me, one of the first answers would be is letting people know that you don't have to have a job to vote. First of all, you don't have to have a job to vote. It's not required to be employed to vote, to exercise your right to vote. We could call vote writers and your other organization, Getting Souls to the Polls, to have them educated on how to get free identification if they need it. There's access to that in all over the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee County, to get free IDs to help you vote. So to me, those would be two, right? So educating people, getting the word out that you do not have to be employed to vote, how to get free identification if you need identification, if you need a ride to go vote. You can also request your absentee ballot. You can still do that, I would say, even up until the 20th. I would encourage people, if you have not already requested an absentee ballot or that you can do it, you can vote from home. You don't even have to go out. So employment is not required. If you're homeless and you have access to a shelter, then you also can have that absentee ballot delivered to that shelter, and they will get that ballot to you, and you can still vote. You can have a witness available to you. So I want to believe that there's nothing that can get in the way, even if you're unemployed, of voting. There's still an opportunity to vote.
Thank you. Mr. County Executive, can the County Executive Office protect early voting and consider legislation that would expand voting hours?
So unfortunately, when you think about laws related to voting, they are made at the state level. So we cannot do anything locally. But we are always working with our state representatives and state senators that represent Milwaukee County, advocating on behalf of our residents, making sure they have access to vote. So we are always working with the state, whether we're talking about the budget or whether we're talking about pieces of legislation that creates greater access to voting. These are the issues that we work with our partners at the state level to continuously work on. And you know, sometimes it could be an uphill battle when you think about what is happening right now, but we can't let our foot off the gas pedal. Every day, all the time, we have to continue talking about, you know, increasing access to voting. And when you talk about expanding early voting hours and allowing local municipalities to do that, we think local municipalities are in the best place possible to make that decision, and shouldn't be done at the state level.
All right. Pastor Briscoe, the local elections affect our daily lives. How do you explain this to a person who just got out of prison?
We tell them that we try to first explain to them that some of the reasons you are where you are is because the laws are skewed in that direction. In order to work for your benefit, you have to become a part of this system of voting, and you have to form organizations that fight the system of voter suppression. That is why, through wisdom, we have developed EXPO, ex-prisoners organizing, or ex-persons organizing. Those that have been affected can reach those other people that are being affected and let them know that we've achieved this right, so now you can do it also. We will show you, and we will grab you by the hand and take you through this process, and you can join this organization to be more effective in the future, because there's a reason your rights have been taken. There's a reason the laws are skewed in your direction. It's in order to take those rights away from you and make you less of a human being. So that has to be explained to them. And sometimes it can be explained better by people that are affected by it.
Dr. Means, are you there? Ms. Freeman?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, you have, okay, thank you.
Oh.
Okay. Let me just go back to your questions here, sorry.
Okay, no worries.
Okay. What do you think we should do to encourage individuals to vote in the spring election on April 6th?
I can tell you that and I, you know, it's just, again, it's a pleasure to be on with the county exec. When you consider the amount of funds that will be flowing into Milwaukee County school districts, and just to stay there, we're talking well over $1.8 trillion that will be flowing through these schools over the next 3 to 4 years as a result of the stimulus dollars. Why should people go to the polls? The person who makes policy. It's the person who ensures that those funds are being utilized effectively. And that person has the bully pulpit to ensure that educational equity, again, is just not a buzzword, but it's something that is happening. This is, in many ways, an election of a lifetime for our kids. The county exec talked about the fact that he has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. I have a 9-year-old. I have a 3rd grader. So the person who's elected in April is going to have a significant impact on my daughter's educational pathway. And so that's why people should come out to the polls on April 6th.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman, many people did not vote in the February 16th election because they didn't know about the election, they did not have IDs, or were not registered voters. What resources does 9 to 5 have to encourage your members to vote?
Well, right now, what we have is 3 teams, one in Fox Valley, one in Milwaukee, one in Racine, that is working on getting out the vote. That's phone calls, that's texting, that's literature drops. We have a thing called Working Women's Voter. This is our voter guide. It's a nonpartisan voter guide. It helps people understand what kind of questions to ask. If you don't know what someone stands for, if you don't know if their values match up with your values, what should you be asking them? What kind of answers should you be looking for? So you can find out where folks stand on the issues. Also, giving information and encouraging people to attend various listening sessions about if regarding school board seats, judicial seats, any listening sessions that are going to give you information about what people stand for, if they're going to be supporting what you care about. That's the kind of information we're currently getting out to our members and beyond our membership.
Thank you. To the county executive, how do you feel about automatic voter registration?
Well, I will tell you that I'm a big fan of automatic voter registration. Actually, when I was a state representative, I actually authored legislation to make this very thing possible. And so I believe that all eligible residents have a constitutional right to participate in our elections. And nothing should stand in the way of a voter having their voice heard and their vote counted in our democracy. And so this would allow us to automatically register people to vote when they interact with key state agencies, and in turn really eliminating one of the barriers for eligible voters and really lowers the obstacles to participate. So I think that this is something that we desperately need, not just here in Wisconsin, but across this country.
Dr. Means?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How can the DPI State Superintendent's Office build trust among the community so that they will trust that their votes and their advocacy matters?
You know, that's a great question, Ms. Johnson. I think that's part of the charge, a very new job from a policy standpoint that they've given me at DPI. I'm focusing on creating family and community engagement. And so we will start that process this spring, going into our communities, letting people know where we stand with delivering education to our young people. I've been during this event where someone asked a question around why aren't we teaching about voting in our schools, and I just wanted to point out that we do have in our standards the education, the middle school level. So if we're not teaching it, that's the type of engagement we need to hear about. So engagement will be a big part of the work that I will be doing with our communities, and I have targeted our communities that have been underserved, historically underserved, to really reach out starting the spring. And Ms. Johnson, I just want to take 20 seconds because Ms. Freeman says something that I think is really important. And that is, we've talked a lot about the state superintendent race. We have to make sure that we have greater representation of women and people of color on school boards, because they are the individuals who are making decisions at the local level. We have an amazing executive director of the Wisconsin School Board Association, one of the few people of color leading that, and Mr. John Ashley. But we have to do a better job, not only focusing on the state superintendent race, but ensuring that we are trying to diversify and create greater inclusion on our local school boards.
Thank you. Pastor Briscoe, as an associate minister of New Covenant Baptist Church, can you tell me how the church can help in getting their parishioners to the polls to vote?
Yes, I can. because since slavery, the church, especially in the Black community, has been the most solid and stable institution that we have, and the most trusted institution. We have got to get involved in civics, in instructing our parishioners and in instructing people of all colors that they are all citizens, they are all involved in the community, and they must become involved in everything about the community. Because I'm a 72 graduate of North Division High School, and I often wondered why schools just out of our district were supplied with better equipment, with better learning tools than we were. It's because we were not totally engaged in the political atmosphere, and it has to come from an institution that is trusted and that has a long-running history of civil rights and voting rights and all of the things that our community needs. So the church absolutely has to take a major role in our education politically and with finances, so that we can start building generational wealth and generational political power.
Thank you. Kim, do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, we do. One question is for Mr. Crowley. What more can the county do to let people know it's time to vote?
I think that's an excellent question. I will tell you that not only myself, but the other constitutional officers within Milwaukee County, as well as the County Board of Supervisors, are out there every day talking about the importance of voting. And right now, I think that, when you think about what in the middle of this pandemic, I think that it's clouded a lot of it, a lot of everything that's going on around us. But it does not stop the fact that we have to get out there and continue to talk about the importance of this upcoming election. I mean, we have a county board seat up right now. We're talking about the Department of Public Instruction. So we have to continue to utilize our social media platforms, our websites. But anytime anyone touches one of Milwaukee County's agencies, it's important that we talk about what is currently going on in our community, and voting is one of those things.
Thank you. Kim, was that the only question?
No, there's another question.
Thank you.
The League of Women Voters, in partnership with MPS and the Milwaukee Election Commission, conduct voter registration drives in 60 high schools. How could this important work be institutionalized so that eligible students are registered to vote routinely by the schools when they turn 18?
Who would like to answer that question? Dr. Means?
Yes, I would. I think you can institutionalize it by ensuring that there are professional learning opportunities for social studies teachers in not only Milwaukee Public Schools, but across the state. But in particular, Milwaukee Public Schools. I think the more you have connections with those social studies teachers and the principals, the more likely you'll be able to get into schools. When I was in my school district in Georgia, we literally created a program where our NAACP and other local groups had the opportunity to engage with our social studies teachers, our principals, to register our kids to vote. And it made a big difference. And it trickled down. It trickled down to even their families, and their families learned more and became more interested in the voting and the election process.
Thank you. Would anybody else care to say anything about that question?
The other thing I would add to that is, connect with the school board members. See if this could be a part of the process and get this at the board level so we can make sure that all the schools are implementing this. We have a lot of elected officials on the school board and just in general within Milwaukee County that is willing to assist. And I would say, reach out to your school board member and see if they can put forth a resolution to actually make that happen.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just add, I know for us, we would love to come into the schools and do voter education, helping, starting with the voter guide, helping young people understand voting, and they can take that information home to their parents. So really doing community building and civic engagement in the schools. We need to start there. We don't need to wait till they're 18.
Pastor Briscoe, is there some type of program for the children with incarcerated parents that you can talk about?
Yes, they're called parents of incarcerated individuals. And this is forming a large base whereby this information, the things that they're going through, the things that affect them, and the things that they see that the system is doing to their loved ones and that affecting them, they are now being able to take this all the way to the governor's office. They're having listening sessions. Matter of fact, the governor has been in on a few of those. So they're gaining a voice and being able to express the need for more humanity and more attention to their plight and to their needs. So these are growing organizations, not just in Milwaukee, but around the country, that have taken into account of how these individuals are affected by their loved ones in jail and what they're lacking and how it puts them in poverty and how the parents and the children feel about it. So this is a growing effort in this state.
Thank you. Ms. Freeman, the message of voting will have to resonate through the state. Tell us how 9 to 5 will encourage its members to vote in the April 6th election.
Okay, I think I've probably talked about that a little bit, but so what we're doing is calling folks, texting people, literature drops to give them information on making sure people know. I think the biggest challenge for spring elections for this is for people to even know that there's elections. So getting out the information that there is an election, that it is important, and that you need to participate in it, understanding the significance of who's on the ballot. We do a lot of ballot education. Who's on the ballot, showing people what the ballot looks like, how to fill the ballot out. We found last year that the ballot is very intimidating for a lot of our families, for a lot of our households. So really, literally walking people through the ballot. So that is a part of the work that we're doing in those 3 locations: Fox Valley, Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha.
Thank you. To the county exec, you started out as a community organizer. So I think you'll understand this question. Why do you think we had less than 10% voter turnout for the February 16th election?
That's definitely a loaded question. And, I would say that there's a lot of factors that contribute to low turnout. And state election officials expected fewer people to cast ballots. But one, I would say, election fatigue from the historic November election, which we saw 72% turnout. And unfortunately, this race didn't get a lot of attention either, but with national headlines related to the transition and the pandemic really dominating the news. And so we have to do a much better job in really talking about why these elections matter and how they're directly connected to their everyday lives. And so when I ran for my seat, for example, a lot of people ask the question, well, what is the county executive? What does the county do? And I had to really get a lot of education about the things that we do. And I was able to do that through my own experience. And so when we think about how do we continue to encourage people to come out and vote, we have to find ways to directly find their self-interest to this particular matter, to DPI. And if you have children, if you have grandchildren, this is an important race that is coming up, because we're talking about the individual who's going to be literally allocating dollars to the school districts that's going to be teaching your child. So we have to do a better job of as the governor would say, connecting the dots to the people on the ground so they know why it's important.
Thank you. Dr. Means? Dr.
I'm here.
Means?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
There seems to be a lot of debate about about funding charter school versus public schools. Can you clarify the difference between charter schools, voucher schools, and public schools?
Yes. So traditional public schools are the schools that were in existence up until the early 1990s. And they are schools that are generally funded either through local property taxes or state tax dollars. A charter school is a school that is chartered either through a private charter or through a charter of another chartering agency. The city of Milwaukee is a charter agency. I believe MATC is a chartering agency. UWM is a charter agency. Milwaukee Public Schools is a chartering agency. So you can either be a private charter, and a private charter is something if you've heard of Rocket Ship, that's a private charter. The KIPP schools is a private charter. So you can either be a private charter and work on your own as a charter school. You normally have investors who fund those schools, or you can be a public charter and you have some type of public entity who will charter you. In the state of Wisconsin, we're unique because now we also have a third sector, which is called voucher schools, where private schools, in many cases religiously grounded schools, also have the ability to receive public dollars to support their schools. And so those are the differences in terms of the sectors. There's traditional, charter. I like to differentiate charter by saying it's either a public charter or a private charter, and then you have vouchers.
And so how do these schools compare in terms of academic achievement?
It's like comparing apples and oranges. Everyone is not the landscape in which we evaluate the performance of schools are different for each of those sectors. Every sector does not take the same assessments. We're not all under the same guidelines and regulations. And so it's really hard, and it comes down to a lot of perception and what people perceive schools to be. And so that's a hard question, and it's really difficult to answer because we haven't created an equal landscape to make that evaluation.
Thank you. Pastor Briscoe, how does exercising the right to vote positively affects formerly incarcerated individuals?
Because if you notice what really fueled the incarceration system was the war on drugs, and then we had the tough on crime legislation that came in the 90s. And those two things totally just supersized the population. Once you gain the right to vote, you can vote down legislation locally and statewide that is fueling these two entities. You get a chance to vote for your own interests, to vote for the interests of the community, and therefore you can put down some of these things that are are totally being punitive to a certain number of people. Your vote locally, statewide, and nationally is vitally important. And that's why I want to emphasize that we sometimes expend our whole war chest on these elections that are large and are glamorous, like the presidential election, and don't have enough energy expended to put out on the local ones. We've got to learn how to balance our war chest and balance our connection with other organizations so that once these elections are over, we go right on to the next one with the same energy and the same zeal and vigor, because these things are going to help us change this democracy, and they're going to help us get the rights back to our individuals that have been marginalized. So it's vitally important to teach and to educate those that have been incarcerated that you are vitally important to participate in this process. We need
Thank you. Thank you. Kim, are there any more questions?
Yes, I have 3.
Okay.
This question is for Dr. Means. How can we educate the parents in our communities on the importance of the Title I dollars?
It's an excellent question. That's ultimately it's the responsibility of our public schools. If the schools are not doing it, that's why we've created this position that I'm now in, to ensure that community groups are aware of the title dollars. I can't emphasize enough, there are trillions of dollars being flowed through Title I. So if you're part of a community agency or an organization, and you would like me to come and talk to your organization about Title I dollars, please contact me. I would love to engage.
Okay, and then the next question is for Mr. Crowley. It says, we support you. You are a powerful guy. How can you share your ideas with the little people?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I don't work in a vacuum, and I can't do this work by myself. So it's important that we are all an echo chamber about the great things that is happening in Milwaukee County. So what we need to do is, one, utilize, and I think Ms. Freeman was kind of talking to that, utilizing all the tools that we have access to us. So when you think about reaching many of our young people, those who are not paying attention to the traditional news times or the traditional news outlets, we have to do a better job reaching them on Twitter, reaching them on Facebook, Instagram. Now everybody wants to make these different TikTok videos. We just have to get so creative of how we're reaching folks. But I also think that we can't make the assumption that people know. And so we have to really engage folks about what is out there and what's available. I'm the first African-American elected to this seat, and you still have people who actually think that my predecessor is still the county executive. And so at the end of the day, and no matter how much I'm out there and educating people, there's still a section within our community that is being underserved, that doesn't have access to communication. So we got to do a more door knocking, more lit drops, and utilizing those social media platforms. But I would also say that it's important that, as leaders, that we actually give people the ability to become leaders themselves. And so, I don't want to be the only one out there. I need to be looking at the next young person, the next up and coming community leader that is available, looking to literally grab the torch and run with it as well, because we're in a marathon. And the work that we're in is not for the faint heart, and we have to take care of ourselves. So if we want to do this, we're going to have to bring more people along with us. And as the African proverb goes, if we want to go fast, we'll go by ourselves. But if we want to go far, we need to bring as many people with us as possible.
We can take the last question, Kim.
Yep, the last question is for Mr. Briscoe. It says, why are people of color failing?
Whoa. Whoa. Do we have enough time? But
we don't.
But I would say people of color aren't failing. There's a large amount of our population that's underserved, and that's underperforming. And that's because of the lack of education, the lack of resources, and the lack of care by this entire country. So I would reframe that question: why are we underserved, and why are our neighborhoods striving for resources when we have been a part of this community ever since there was a community, ever since it was a country? A lot of it's based on discrimination. A lot of it's based on the lack of access to proper health care, to proper resources and proper finances. And a lot of it's based on the will of the majority of this country to relinquish that privilege and that right that they have exercised over us. Now, when you get down to it, we have to restore in our communities, in our churches, in our institution, the pride that Dr. King talked about, that somehow we lost the will to achieve and the will to stick to it. And we've got to have somebody and something to get us re-energized and to be believing and really believing that we are a part of this country, that we are vital to this country, and that we built this country, and take that pride on into the communities and take back our rights and take back that pride that we have, that we know that we have, and that we know that we can use to achieve. So I would say that we are not failing. We are down but not out. We are oppressed but not depressed, and we're on the rise.
Thank you, Pastor Briscoe. I am going to give each panelist 2 minutes to express final thoughts, and I will start with Ms. Freeman.
Thank you, Anita. So final thoughts. I didn't grow up in Milwaukee. I moved here after growing up on a small farm in Alabama, in a place that I used to call the Garden of Eden because it was so beautiful. And what I know from working in this community for 30 plus years is that I always thought Milwaukee had the potential to be a model community of what it looked like to end poverty. I feel like it wasn't that big. We all know you go north this far, south this far, east this far, west this far. And the people had the will. We have so many amazing community organizations doing amazing work. And then how do we harness all that? You got the Milwaukee Blueprint, you got Reimagine Milwaukee, you got the STEM program, you got the work that's being done at Marquette, you got trauma-informed care work all over the city. How do we take all that work together and really target and all this money that is flooding in and really be more systematic about how we end poverty in this community and really address anti-oppression in this? We could become a model city, and other people could could study Milwaukee for how to do that. I think we have that, and we have a history of that, of how to do something here where everyone wants to duplicate. I think we have the power and the will and the potential to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Pastor Briscoe, 2 minutes, please.
I want to take off from Ms. Freeman's a little bit because I was born in Mississippi on a farm, and I was born into Jim Crow segregated school. I moved from Mississippi to Detroit to schools that were desegregated and to middle-class Black people that were working at factories and that had a decent living. Moved from there to Milwaukee, and the same thing. They had communities. There was no drugs, gangs, violence was limited, and people were working and making middle-class lifestyles, and Black people were excelling. All of that was snatched from underneath them, and then the gangs, guns, violence, drugs, all of that came in, and we lost our way. We must restore our ability to have riches, to have resources, and it showed what we could do when we had those, because we had lived a middle-class lifestyle that functioned well and that served this city well, and that we could have that again if this city has the will to restore all of those things that made us a thriving community.
Thank you, Pastor Briscoe. Mr. Crowley?
Well, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. And I want to kind of go and, touch on the question that Reverend Briscoe was answering about why Black people are failing. And I think that we need to understand that Black people aren't failing. The system has failed us. Amen. Purposely. And so when we think about systemic racism that has been here in this country for over 400 years, we have to understand that we were put into a box, and it's almost like a crab in a barrel type of thing, to where now we're all trying to make it. And so we have to, one, acknowledge the fact that there were so many different policies and practices and laws in place to make sure that we have continued to fail. But this is also one of the reasons why we have switched our mission at Milwaukee County to say that we will be the healthiest county in the state of Wisconsin by achieving racial equity. And we have seen the disparities growing in the middle of this pandemic. And many of these things that we have seen in the past year, we've known prior to the pandemic. We know what happened in housing. We know what's happening in incarceration. We know what's happening in education. And I guess if I had to leave with anything, it would leave you with a quote. It may be a little cheesy, but it's from a great philosopher, and his name is Yoda, and it's do or do not, there is no try. So when we talk about being engaged, you have to go out there and do it. And the reason why I say there's no try, because if you fall, you don't try to get up, you do it. And that's what we need to do as a community. That's what we need to do in Milwaukee County to make sure that we're making this a better place, not only just for people of color, but for everybody, because when we all do better, we all do better.
Thank you. Dr. Means?
I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity. I hope that this is a conversation that's shared with others. I want to thank Reverend Briscoe and Ms. Freeman and County Executive Crawley. I would just close by saying that this is a pivotal moment in education in this state. And to just take what David said, we can't continue to admire the fact that Black kids are doing the worst in the country in this state. We have to do something about it. So the election on April 6th should be about who's going to empower our Black and brown kids to do better. But again, I want to also just draw your attention to these Title I funds. I can't emphasize enough, the amount of money that's flowing into our schools is something that we need to all pause, step back, and ask the question, how will Black and brown families be engaged in the decision-making of how to use these dollars? And so I encourage you, if you want to reach out to me, because part of my policy work is to make sure that our underserved and historically marginalized communities are being brought to the table. And then the last thing I would say is that, we all know in certain communities, we're all cousins in some kind of way, shape, or form. And so you don't have to have a child in your household to be involved in these conversations. You can be that surrogate representative at the table to make sure that our kids are getting what they deserve. We cannot let this moment in history be a moment where our kids do not receive better care and better service. We have to come out of this pandemic better than where we were in March of 2020. We cannot go back. And so I would encourage, I think, Ms. Johnson, you have my contact information.
Yes.
People have been asking, how do we make sure that those title funds are being used in a way? This is a question, while the county executive doesn't control education, it's a question he can ask our school board members across his entire county. These are the types of questions we should be asking. How are you using the dollars? And the follow-up question should be, and how are you engaging all of your families in the decision-making process? Because often they bring our families to the table and they tell us what they're going to do with the funds. That is no longer an option. So thank you for the opportunity. Let's build on this and do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor to have all of you on the panel and the discussions that we've had this evening. I hope will encourage the people that are listening to take it back to their community and encourage people to vote. I would like to leave with a quote from the late Congressman John Lewis. The vote is precious. It's almost sacred. So go out and vote like you never voted before. I would like to thank the people behind the scenes, Matthew Mixon, Kimberly Eubanks, and Rhonda Stovall. Thank you very much and good night.
Good night, everybody. Have a blessed evening.
Good night, everyone.